Hey YouTube, this is the Art of Prepping. So I have 10 categories here. This is going to be for preppers and of course non-preppers as well, but since this is a prepping channel, I just say these are some prepper things that we need to look at. These are very important. It's arguably probably the top 10. These categories, we'll talk about individual items as well, but these are really categories we just have to have. If you really want to avoid death and extreme suffering, to mitigate some of these horrendous things that can happen in a moment's notice, there will be 4 bonus categories at the end. Now, the first thing that I would say, and these are not really in particular order by any means of priorities, but they're all important. So that's why I had to make this list, especially for new preppers and intermediate preppers that are still trying to figure out what are the priorities for prepping. You'd be surprised. People just get confused. They think it's just maybe a little bit of food, a little water, and a flashlight, and or they go to a government site and it says, "Oh, you just need 3 days of food and water and a blanket," and there's a lot more to it. If you just stop and think about the things you use and need on a daily basis, you'll see that it's more than just a few items. So number 1 is water. It's not only just your water supply to last you for the period of time that you feel and deem is adequate, but it's your filter. And man, having a really quality, good filter, it could be a Berkey filter, a Katadyn filter, whatever it is you pick, do research and make a good investment in your filter system. Have extra filters with that filter system. Also, you might want to have at least 1 to 3 means of collecting water for your area so that you can filter and you can store it. So you want to have that renewable option. Number 2, food supplies. Now, food supplies is not just, even though it's very important, it's not just your cache, your reserve of food, your physical prep food, but also means to have renewables such as your seed collection, your ongoing garden. Maybe you have various animals you grow. Maybe you have chickens. So food is an expansive category that is made up of various different elements. Number 3, the emergency portable shelter. This doesn't usually get talked about in this manner, but your primary shelter could easily be compromised. If you think that you're going to weather any adversity and all adversity in your home, you'll have something coming to you because there are things called like wildfires. Your house could actually burn down. You could have a total destruction, a total loss, maybe from a large storm system such as a hurricane, or it could be a tornado. It could just be high sheer winds. I've seen winds 80 to 100 miles per hour and just picks up the whole roof and just takes and tears it right off. So you have this issue here that a portable shelter system, it could be a really high quality tent system, or if you even had to, maybe just putting various tarps together and make a makeshift shelter. Whatever is reasonable and practical for you in your region and for your finances, it's going to be good to have that redundancy. And that's no joke. And so the next thing would be number 4, fire starters, tinder, and fuel sources. This is not just for creating fires in your fireplace and to have means to create fire to cook. This is also encompassing your energy sources. It could be, gas-powered generators. It could be solar collectors for your solar panels and battery banks to have electricity or other power sources. So this is a large encompassing category, but there are definitely some things you'd want to have. And just at the very minimum, some various camp stoves, different means to make fire, different tenders, and have at least a little bit of a cache of wood or whatever types of other sources of fuel that you can have in your area safely that you can store. So it can be maybe difficult for certain locations. Maybe you live in Florida, and because of the heat and so forth, maybe storing gasoline or diesel is difficult, even when you use the additives and the preservatives, the preserving agents to extend the life of it. It can be a lot more difficult than if you live maybe up north. So there's a lot of different variables. Number 5, your medical kits. Without going into all detail, basically you're going to need a good trauma kit or an element of trauma to your first aid kit, and antibiotics. Those 2 are among many others, but those are the ones to kind of look at first. And of course, you could also add like potassium iodine tablets and other things to safeguard yourself. Protective equipment, maybe like NBC mask systems. So you can actually weather, nuclear, biological, or chemical attacks. So you don't have to breathe that in. Number 6, tools and repair. Now, this is just a super large category, but you can actually refine this pretty quickly in terms of tools, whatever the tools that you need in your area. If you need to cut wood, then obviously maybe a saw or axe. If you don't live in any place that has wood, maybe a multi-tool or maybe a pry bar or maybe a good blade. Maybe that's what you need. But, it doesn't have to be elaborate, but it just depends on the resources around you. Now, hand in hand with tools is going to be repair. And these are going to be a lot of things. It could be anything from cording to various adhesives. It could be tapes. It could be types of glues. It just could be a lot of things. Repair could just be having nails and screws and spare plywood. I don't know. It just depends on whatever is damaged. But having that in reserve as well is going to be critical to maintain your infrastructure of your home, basically wherever you're at or whatever you need to build. Because sometimes it's not so much even repairing something as to construct something so that you can be more flexible and to endure longer. The next category would be number 7. That's going to be compass and map, basically navigation in its entirety. Having the means and know-how to get where you want to go, or if you are lost, to get to the point so you're not lost. These are obviously very simple, but even if you're not lost and you're at your home, having a good map is going to be another resource, especially when the grid's down or there's no electricity, if there's no means to get internet and there's no way to use your phone as a navigational tool. But to have an actual piece of paper, an actual map that you can look at and study and say, hey, there's the thread over there, and I'm here, and this is where I need to go. And so you can plan routes to get away from threats. So having physical maps are key. I mean, every prepper should have redundant maps in every location, every pack, system, and vehicle, and in the home. Number 8 is lighting. And now lighting sources is going to be fairly detailed, but it doesn't have to be over the top. Yes, lanterns are good. Having some candles isn't the worst thing in the world. And having battery-powered flashlights and headlamps being one of the top. But you want to have some means of renewability. So the solar-paneled, solar-powered light systems, the hand-crank light systems, and having even alternative means to recharge your battery if you have batteries in your lights, and it's not just a capacitor alone. Those type of systems are going to even be more helpful. Unfortunately, there's a lot of crank lights that are real low output. They're kind of bulky. They haven't really perfected that. So you still have to kind of look kind of hard to find decent ones. But for the most part, though, you could store, if you rotate your batteries on an ongoing basis and have a nice cache of batteries, it could go for quite a while, especially if you have a good quality, efficient LED lights, especially your headlamps. Some of those now, man, can go hundreds of hours depending on what light setting you have it on. Number 9, appropriate clothing. This is our first layer of shelter, our defense against the elements. And if you don't have good, decent clothes that's appropriate to your environment, like for example, in the winter, if you don't have good wool and sweat wicking, maybe it's polyester types of material as a base layer. If you don't have appropriate setups, it's going to be harder to be more flexible and to adjust to the demands that you have. And so this goes for things like, waterproof ponchos or rain jackets, whatever, maybe coat systems, maybe you need insulated coveralls, whatever is appropriate for your area. Have those good boots and those gloves and those hats, eye protection and so forth. Clothing is very much one of the most untalked about or under talked about types of categories. It's amazing how people just write it off as if they're always going to just have the right clothing. When you look at all the studies of people who get lost in the woods from the Parks Department, one of the main reasons that they have a so-called survival situation is because they're caught out in the elements without enough cover or protection. And that's just simply because they don't have the right clothing on. And if they simply had the right clothing, they probably wouldn't even have the emergency to begin with. So always learn that clothing is of the utmost importance when you're out in the environment. Number 10, firearms or personal protection tools. Depending on where you live and what country you live in, I know I have a lot of different subscribers and viewers from various countries all around the world, and unfortunately, almost all of them do not allow firearms. They do not allow even knives in a lot of cases, or pepper spray. And to me, it's just like a whole nother, it's like a twilight zone. I personally couldn't understand that. It's hard for me to digest living like that. And I feel for you a lot. And you guys know who you're talking, who I'm talking to. Hey man, I don't really understand why the government, well, I think I do, but the government doesn't trust you. And so I wouldn't trust them back, and it'd be real easy for me to say, move, go to another more free country. But you and I know it's very difficult just to pick up and move away from your family and friends and just move. It's not even practical for most people. Probably for 99% of the people wouldn't do that. So they would rather have less freedom and be with their loved ones than to have more freedom and to be alone and have to start over. So it's understandable, but it's just a real shame that the governments of the world are so tyrannical, and they think that this is the best way to rule. When in real life, if they opened up the floodgates of freedom, everybody would prosper. But of course, they don't want you to prosper because they want to control all the mechanisms, all the systems. And if they give too much freedom, they don't have any more control anymore. So firearms, if you can own them, own them. Have the best means of protection you can for where you live. And this is not just for personal protection, though. Firearms and other types of weapon systems could be used for hunting. It can go on and on, but having the means to protect yourself and your family is one of the top priorities, safety. And if you can't protect your preps, then they can just be taken from you, especially by force. And there's a lot of people say, oh, it's just not necessary to have a firearm. I'll just fight them off. I've got, big biceps and triceps, and I've done martial arts. Yeah, you try to fight off a gang of people. Maybe there's 6 or 12, and they have baseball bats or machetes, or maybe they're armed, and you try to take them on with your fist. And you're gonna wake up to the realities that you're just living in a pipe dream. And so you have to, in the modern day age, actually have the means to repel, threats. I would go so far to say they're evil. By definition, they are evil. These people that are just criminals, and these criminals will come out of the woodwork in a natural disaster, a man-made disaster, especially a war or a civil war. They'll take advantage of whoever and whatever they can. Now, I have 4 bonus items here. The first one is going to be your emergency fund. Not only just your cash reserves, or maybe if you have gold and silver, if you can even afford that, that's awesome. My hat off to you. But it also includes barter reserves and resources. And I have videos on that. Number 2 bonus would be your 72-hour bug out bag. That could also maybe be a hybrid survival pack, or whatever systems you have. But just having the means to have a bag that you can grab and go that will sustain you for 3 to 5 days is going to be critical to overcoming the early onset of a disaster. All the research shows that if you can survive and get through the first 3 days of almost any emergency, your chances of survival long term is increased. Dramatically. And so this is the key of why we push the bug out bag or the Bob, with the 72-hour kit, whatever you want to call it. This bag, this is life sustaining. This is no joke. There's a lot of people who put these together as a hobby, and it gets almost like an extraordinary amount of attention just because there's a lot of cool gear in the bag. But the reality is, it's not just the cool gear in the bag that the reason you buy it. It's because it can actually save your life. And this is why we really need to have it. And it's not some kind of, even though it sometimes feels like it's a fad or something. Oh, let's just go and put together a bug out bag. No, it's a real thing that could really help you. So don't poo-poo that. Number 3 bonus is going to be cooking. This is your mess kit gear, various things, your pots and pans and anything that you can imagine to help you cook. Even maybe your spices and stuff that gets overlooked a lot of time. So having the means to really be able to cook efficiently, especially in your home, even if it's just in your bug out bag or a mobile kit, having a decent quality pot and cup system, some basic utensils, maybe a portable stove. These will go long ways than just having a basic campfire and trying to find a means to cook over it. There's definitely ways to do that. Lots of primitive ways to use rocks and sticks and all kinds of things you can do. But man, it is so much easier and so much nicer to actually have real mess kit items. And the number 4 bonus is going to be your traps, snares, hunting and fishing gear, whatever it is to procure calories and full complete proteins. And so, and this is, of course, more like an egress or a long-term survival situation that you would really want to maybe traps and snares, but it's good to have them around. Maybe just keep one in your car, a trap or, a handful of wire snares. In terms of hunting, it could be your firearms, it could be bow and arrows, crossbows, it could be spears, whatever that you're, efficient in. Maybe if you're really good with the slingshot, you could even use that to hunt squirrels or chipmunks or even rabbits and so forth. Fishing gear, though, man, that's a really big one because there's a lot of people who live by water. I mean, if you think about it, civilization typically surrounds themselves or puts them near a body of water for obvious reasons, for survival. Towns are built usually on the side of a river or on the side of an ocean, and there's a reason for that, and that's because of the resources, not just the water, but what's in the water. And so fish and all the little things, crabs and whatever else is in that water that you live nearby, learn to actually to get at what's in there, to learn how to fish. And so that's going to be very important. I know where I live, there are some bodies of water here and there, and I'm sure there's a lot of fish out there and there's resources, but don't think that everybody's not going to think of this. So you're going to have competition. I'm not going to say that all the fisheries in the United States or in the world would be wiped out within a year or two, after a major collapse or something. But I will say that they would be, and the population of fish and other critters in the waters would be lessened quite a bit. And with that, though, you'd have to kind of be mindful of diversifying other things. That's why growing a garden and having your own animals to grow as a renewable resource is very much key. Thanks for listening to this this top 10 here, plus bonus items. Wish everyone well. You guys take care. Catch you soon.